In 2019, a man in rural Australia was gored to death by his own pet deer, an animal he had raised for years. It happened during mating season, when even normally tame stags can turn violently territorial. The deer charged without warning, slamming its antlers into him repeatedly and fatally wounding him. When his wife ran over to help, the animal attacked her too, leaving her critically injured before police shot it dead. Deer attacks are extremely rare, but during rutting season, even a beloved pet can turn into a deadly threat. In 2010, at Vortex Spring in Florida, 30-year-old Ben McDaniel entered the site's underwater cave system alone. The cave is known for tight, winding passages that require specialized training. McDaniel apparently went past safety restrictions into deeper sections and never resurfaced. Days later, his scuba tanks were found inside the caves, but despite multiple recovery attempts, his body has never been located. His disappearance remains unsolved, as he likely became trapped deep within the cave system, essentially swallowed by the cave itself, where recovery is impossible. Here's a photo of American soldier Joseph Dwyer carrying a wounded Iraqi boy away from crossfire during the Iraq War in 2003, an image that became a symbol of compassion amid chaos. After returning home, Dwyer was diagnosed with severe PTSD, became unemployed, and suffered a marital breakdown as his mental health deteriorated into paranoia and violent delusions. In 2008, after years of psychological struggle and substance abuse, Joseph Dwyer died from a drug overdose, a quiet end to a life permanently altered by the horrors of war. In 2025, 15-year-old woodworking apprentice Muhammad Kandirsi died after coworkers assaulted him with a high-pressure air hose during what they reportedly called a workplace prank. The force of the compressed air caused massive internal damage, including rupturing of his intestines and severe internal bleeding. Doctors said the sudden air pressure led to rapid organ failure and shock, and despite emergency treatment, his injuries were too extensive for him to be saved. Authorities treated the incident as a violent assault, and the case sparked massive outrage over deadly hazing and abuse in the workplace. In 2010 in Philadelphia, federal agents and local authorities raided a clinic run by Kermit Gosnell, initially suspecting it was operating as a pill mill. What they found inside was far more horrific than illegal prescriptions. Investigators reported a pervasive stench, filthy conditions, and blood-stained equipment left uncleaned. The clinic was described as so unsanitary that several agents said they felt physically ill while searching it. As the investigation expanded, it was revealed that Gosnell had been performing late-term abortions under dangerous conditions, often far outside legal limitations. According to testimony, babies born alive were killed by severing their spinal cords. Untrained staff were heavily involved in procedures, and essential medical standards were ignored. Authorities also found fetal remains scattered throughout the clinic, including in a freezer, jars, bags, and plastic jugs. The grand jury later described the place as a baby charnel house. In 2013, Gosnell was convicted of multiple counts of first-degree murder, including the deaths of the infants born alive, as well as involuntary manslaughter in the death of one of his patients. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In 1989, in Bangkok, Thailand, Billy Idol went on a drug-fueled binge after a breakup that spiraled out of control. Later admitted the trip involved heroin, alcohol, and heavy tranquilizer use, leaving him erratic and destructive. He reportedly trashed multiple luxury hotel suites, leaving behind severe damage and hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid bills. The situation soon escalated to the point where authorities were forced to intervene. Billy later said he was tranquilized and strapped to a military stretcher before being carried out and deported, with the Thai army reportedly involved in carrying him out. Idol has since described the incident as one of the lowest points of his life, driven by severe drug abuse and a reckless lifestyle that nearly destroyed him. In 1999, in Towanda, Pennsylvania, 11-year-old Adam Herman disappeared from his adoptive home. No missing persons report was filed at the time. For years afterward, his adoptive parents told family he was returned to state custody, while continuing to claim him as a dependent on taxes, legal filings, and collecting adoptive subsidy payments. In 2008, after his adoptive sister tried to reconnect with him as an adult, she discovered records falsely showed he had lived with the family until age 18. She then reported him missing nearly a decade after he vanished. The adoptive parents were later convicted of fraud for collecting thousands in payments after his disappearance, but no one has ever been charged in connection with what happened to Adam, as his fate remains unknown. Just yesterday, on April 19, 2026, in Shreveport, Louisiana, 31-year-old Army National Guard veteran Shamar Elkins killed 8 children, 7 of them his own, after a domestic dispute with his wife, who he was in the process of separating from. Just hours before the attack, he'd been posting photos online, including one about spending time with his daughter, and nothing about it suggested anything was wrong or that something horrific was about to happen. Early that morning, he shot his wife first, who survived, and then went to another home where the children were and killed all 8 of them. Several were shot while asleep in their beds, and at least one child tried to escape but was still killed. The victims ranged from very young children to preteens. In the time leading up to it, family members said he'd been dealing with mental health struggles and what they described as dark thoughts. He also had a prior firearm-related arrest in 2019, but no clear single motive has been confirmed beyond the domestic situation escalating. Afterward, he fled the scene, carjacked a vehicle, and led police on a chase before being shot and killed by 2 officers. 2 adults survived the shooting with critical injuries, and the killings became one of the deadliest mass shootings involving children in recent U.S. history. In 2013, in Los Angeles, California, 15-year-old Paris Jackson was hospitalized after a serious self-harm attempt. It came 4 years after the 2009 death of her father, Michael Jackson, during a period where she was dealing with intense grief, constant media attention, online harassment, and widespread public speculation that she wasn't biologically his daughter. She was placed under psychiatric care following the incident, marking one of the lowest points in her life after losing her father. When Michael died in 2009 in Los Angeles, it was revealed his finances were far worse than people realized. Despite his global fame, he was reportedly $500 million in debt, tied to massive loans, legal costs, and the upkeep of assets like Neverland Ranch. His death triggered a complex financial collapse behind the scenes, forcing his estate into an immediate battle to stabilize what he left behind. Immediately after his death, Michael's body was held for weeks during autopsies and investigations, and kept in a private mausoleum as family disputes and legal issues delayed the funeral. His public memorial at Staples Center drew millions, ending with his daughter Paris Jackson breaking down in tears in one of the only times she ever spoke publicly.
Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine. And I just wanted to say I love him so much.
But even after he was finally laid to rest more than 2 months later, his death triggered years of lawsuits, accusations, and renewed abuse claims, including those reignited by the documentary Leaving Neverland. Instead of closure, everything around him only grew more disputed, leaving behind a legacy that's still being argued over long after his death. In Philadelphia, Tammy Terrell began suffering severe migraines as a child after reportedly being assaulted at age 11. By 17, she was in a relationship with 30-year-old James Brown, who she later claimed physically abused her. In her early 20s, she became involved with David Ruffin, who she also described as violent, with accounts claiming he once struck her in the head with a motorcycle helmet. As her career with Marvin Gaye was taking off, she collapsed on stage in 1967, later diagnosed with a brain tumor. Over the next few years, she underwent multiple surgeries as the tumor kept returning. In March of 1970, at just 24 years old, she died after a long decline, with speculation that repeated head trauma may have contributed to or worsened her condition. Here's an incredible video of a mother deer in someone's yard with not 1 but 2 albino fawns beside her. Albino deer are extremely rare, estimated to occur in roughly 1 out of every 20,000 births. Seeing 2 at once is even rarer, but it likely means the fawns are twins, sharing the same genetic mutation that prevents their bodies from producing any pigment. The condition gives them their ghost white fur and pink eyes, but it also makes survival in the wild much harder, since their lack of camouflage and vision problems make them easier targets for predators. Because of this, many albino deer unfortunately don't live very long in the wild. After traveling for 9 years and covering more than 3 billion miles, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft finally reached Pluto in 2015. When it flew past the distant dwarf planet, it captured this video revealing something no one expected. Massive icy mountains rising thousands of feet above Pluto's surface. Made of frozen water as hard as rock, some of these peaks rise more than 11,000 feet high. And because Pluto's so small, you can actually see the planet's curvature right behind them, making the mountains look enormous against the horizon. Rama Haruna was born in Nigeria in 1996 and appeared healthy at birth, but at around 6 months old, she suddenly became ill and her body stopped developing normally. As she got older, most of her body stopped growing and she lost the ability to sit or stand, leaving her with a severely shortened torso and almost no functioning limbs. While her body remained extremely small, her head continued to grow and age normally, creating a striking contrast that doctors were never able to fully explain. Because she couldn't move on her own, Rama's family often carried her around in a large plastic bucket so so she could leave the house. Despite constant pain, she remained mentally sharp and spoke about wanting to live a normal life. She died in 2016 at the age of 19 after living her entire life with the unexplained condition. In the 1840s, Anarcha Westcott, an enslaved black woman, was forced to undergo about 30 experimental gynecological surgeries performed by Dr. J. Marion Sims, who was later known as the father of modern gynecology. Sims was apparently trying to repair childbirth injuries called fistulas, and the procedures were carried out without anesthesia at a time when many physicians believed African Americans couldn't feel pain. Although his techniques influenced early gynecology, Anarcha has come to symbolize how much medical advancement was built on the suffering of enslaved women. Today, she's remembered as one of the mothers of gynecology, not for a discovery she chose, but for what she was forced to endure. This preserved specimen shows a child's trachea and lungs with a single peanut lodged inside the airway. Small, smooth foods like peanuts are among the most common choking hazards in young children because they can slip past the throat and become wedged in the windpipe, immediately blocking airflow to the lungs. In some cases, the obstruction causes instant suffocation, while in others it leads to infection, swelling, or gradual respiratory failure if not removed in time. Foreign body aspiration remains one of the leading causes of accidental death in young children, since something as small as a peanut can turn fatal extremely fast. In 2007, a University of Tampa student was walking back to her dorm after a pirate festival when a man she had just met offered to walk her home. Once inside, he raped her and disappeared. Police quickly collected DNA from the scene, but for 14 years there was no match and the case went cold. That was until 2021 when the suspect Jared Vaughn made a critical mistake. He uploaded his DNA to a genealogy website to research his family tree. Investigators used that database to connect Vaughn directly to the crime scene. Despite facing a potential life sentence, Vaughn ultimately accepted a plea deal in 2022 that only resulted in probation and being registered as a sex offender. Futoshi Matsunaga was a Japanese serial killer who turned psychological control into a weapon, forcing victims to torture and even murder their own family members through threats, isolation, and extreme brainwashing. Operating in the late 1990s, he targeted vulnerable households, took control of their finances, and used staged punishments to break people mentally until they obeyed him out of fear. Investigators later revealed that several killings were carried out by victims themselves after prolonged coercion, creating a chain of violence where family members as young as 5 years old were forced to turn on each other. Several bodies were dismembered and destroyed to erase evidence, leaving little physical trace until a survivor escaped and alerted police. Matsunaga ended up being sentenced to death in 2005, and the case remains one of Japan's most extreme examples of serial manipulation. In July of 2016, 17-year-old Mike Mansholt suddenly disappeared while exploring ancient catacombs on the island of Malta. 5 days later, his body was found at the base of a cliff, and investigators initially believed he had died in a fall, but the autopsy revealed disturbing inconsistencies. Despite the apparent fall, he had no broken bones, and examiners found that his internal organs were missing, removed through a large opening in the abdomen. Authorities were never able to explain how the organs were removed or what happened to them, leaving the circumstances of his death deeply unsettling and unresolved. Rape-kun was a Humboldt penguin at the Tobu Zoo in Japan, whose longtime mate Midori eventually left him for a younger penguin, leaving him largely isolated from the rest of the colony. But in 2017, the zoo placed cardboard cutouts of characters from the anime Kimono Zoo around the park, including one of Halulu, an anthropomorphic Humboldt penguin, inside his enclosure. Visitors soon noticed Rape-kun repeatedly standing next to the cutout for long periods, and even displaying what appeared to be courtship behavior toward it. Photos of the unusual bond soon went viral online, and the zoo eventually decided to leave the cutout inside the enclosure for him. Rape-kun died a few months later at about 21 years old, with the cardboard character still standing by his side. 24-year-old Bulgarian influencer Andrea Ivanova drew global attention after reportedly spending more than $49,000 on repeated lip filler procedures in pursuit of extreme cosmetic changes. She's publicly shared complications following treatments, including severe swelling, discomfort, and being unable to fully close her mouth. Doctors warn that excessive filler can stretch tissue, increase infection risk, and permanently alter normal facial function. In 2018, a 34-year-old man in Hunan, China attempted to fake his own death by sending his car into a river as part of an insurance fraud scheme meant to send his family a payout of about $145,000. But fully believing her husband had truly died, his wife later drowned their 2 children before taking her own life. Authorities said she had no knowledge of the plan and had been under severe emotional and financial stress, including heavy medical expenses tied to a child's epilepsy treatment. The man resurfaced days later and turned himself into police, telling investigators the scheme was driven by debt, turning what began as a fraud attempt into a fatal chain of unintended consequences. In 1993, Sicilian mafia boss Giovanni Brusca ordered the kidnapping of 12-year-old Giuseppe Di Matteo to silence his father, a former mob insider who had begun cooperating with authorities. Disguised as police, captors lured the boy away, promising to reunite him with his dad. He was held for 779 days in degrading conditions, often caged, beaten, underfed, and moved between hideouts, while photos of his suffering were sent to pressure his father into silence. When testimony continued, Brusca ordered the kill, dismissing the boy as the puppy. Giuseppe was strangled and his body dissolved in acid to erase all evidence. The murder shocked Italy because it shattered the long-promoted myth that the mafia followed a code of honor that spared all children. But investigators in later trials revealed that this was never truly a rule, and Giuseppe's death became one of the most disturbing symbols of the mafia's retaliation tactics during the 1990s crackdowns. In 2019, police uncovered an abuse case at the Danby House nursing home in North Carolina after staff were caught recording and encouraging violent confrontations between elderly residents with dementia. Investigators said workers laughed, filmed, and allegedly urged a 73-year-old man to attack a 70-year-old woman, shouting instructions like punch her in the face while she cried for help. Both residents required constant care and couldn't fully understand what was happening, turning a supervised environment into exploitation for entertainment. The footage led to criminal charges and renewed scrutiny over how vulnerable patients in long-term care facilities can be manipulated by caregivers. In November of 2022, 7-year-old Athena Strand was struck by a FedEx delivery van while playing in her Texas driveway, but she survived the impact with only minor injuries. But instead of calling for help, the driver, 31-year-old Tanner Lynn Horner, panicked after Athena said she was going to tell her father, took her inside his van, and murdered her. Court documents state he first tried to break her neck, and when that failed, strangled her with his bare hands while she was still alive. He then drove around for hours and dumped her body near the Trinity River, returning to work as if nothing had happened. Athena's disappearance sparked a massive search, and her body was found 2 days later after Horner confessed and led police to the location. He was charged with capital murder and kidnapping, with prosecutors seeking the harshest possible sentence. Scientists have captured the oldest living vertebrate on Earth drifting through near black Arctic waters, a Greenland shark moving slowly through the depths. Clear footage of these sharks is extremely uncommon because they live so deep and in low light. Scientists believe some can live for centuries, with eye lens analysis suggesting lifespans up to 400 years and possibly even closer to 500. They only grow about a centimeter per year, yet can still reach lengths over 20 feet, and females may not reach sexual maturity until around 150 years old, one of the slowest life cycles ever recorded. Many carry parasites that eventually damage their vision, yet they still hunt using scent and vibration. If the highest estimates are correct, this animal could have been alive since the 1500s, moving through the ocean long before the Pilgrims sailed to America. Here's some footage from an actual other world, captured by a robotic rover crawling across the surface of Mars nearly 225 million miles from Earth. What you're seeing isn't a traditional video recording. It's a splicing of thousands of individual photos stitched together into a moving panorama, since rovers don't record footage the way cameras on Earth do. Every frame has to survive extreme cold, radiation, and dust before being sent back as radio signals traveling through space. You're looking at terrain no human has ever touched, ancient rock formations and dry landscapes that may have once held water, captured piece by piece by a machine made by humans exploring a silent planet. This was the moment a mermaid performer was attacked by a Chinese sturgeon during a live aquarium show. The performer, Maria Zelenina, was swimming inside a tank at Xishuangbanna Primitive Forest Park when the massive fish lunged forward without warning and pulled her head into its jaws as spectators watched in horror. She fought free underwater and surfaced in visible distress with her goggles ripped off, suffering from facial bruising, swelling around her eye, and lingering pain that affected her vision, later requiring medical treatment. While there are no confirmed cases of a sturgeon killing a human, the species can grow over 10 feet long, weighs hundreds of pounds, and has powerful jaws capable of crushing bone, meaning a sustained bite or loss of air underwater could easily be fatal. Here's a clip showing the importance of being aware of your surroundings at all times. In the video, a family is unloading their car in what many commenters believe to be a South American country like Argentina. Before going inside, the woman immediately senses something is wrong when a car pulls up directly in front of her. Without hesitation, she runs inside and locks the door just seconds before the men can reach the house. With no access to the home, the men quickly grab items from the family's car, get back in their vehicle, and speed off. Here's some extremely rare footage of a giant squid feeding on a much smaller squid. For centuries, giant squid were dismissed as pure myth, nothing more than sailor legends like the Kraken. Their existence wasn't even scientifically accepted until 1857, and humans didn't film one alive in the deep sea until 2012. Even today, they remain among the least observed large animals on Earth. They live thousands of feet below the surface in near total darkness, and almost no one in history has ever seen one actively hunting, let alone captured it on video. Here's an extremely rare compilation of wild animals shedding their antlers. Antlers are one of the fastest growing bones in the animal kingdom, and unlike horns, they're designed to fall off and regrow every year. While antlers are growing, they're covered in a soft, blood-rich skin called velvet that supplies oxygen and nutrients to the developing bone. Once the antlers reach full size, rising testosterone levels cut off that blood supply, the velvet dies, and the animal rubs it off against trees and brush to expose the hardened bone beneath. After mating season ends, hormone levels drop again, the bone weakens at the base, and the entire antler eventually detaches and breaks away. This cycle allows deer, elk, and moose to grow a completely new set of antlers each year, often larger than the last. Brendan Fraser's brief collapse was driven by years of physical destruction, psychological breakdown, and what many believe was a Hollywood blacklist. At the height of his career, he was performing nearly all of his own stunts, which led to multiple herniated discs, spinal compression, a fractured pelvis, and repeated surgeries that left him in constant pain. In 1999, Fraser nearly died during the filming of The Mummy when a hanging stunt went horribly wrong and the rope was pulled too tightly, cutting off blood flow to his brain and causing him to lose consciousness. He later said doctors told him he came dangerously close to serious brain injury or death. Around the same time, he endured the passing of his mother, a financially devastating divorce, and severe depression. Brendan later alleged he was sexually assaulted by a powerful Hollywood executive in 2003, and after speaking about it privately, his career abruptly stalled. Many believe he was quietly blacklisted as major roles vanished almost overnight, leaving him to describe himself as invisible for years while living in pain and isolation. After roughly a 15-year hiatus, Fraser ultimately rebuilt his life and career, returning to Hollywood on his own terms and finding renewed stability and appreciation from fans.